I was excited to visit my grandmother's house in the countryside last fall. It had been years since I last saw her, and I missed that familiar warmth of her old two-story house. My parents were going on a trip, so they thought it would be a good idea for me to stay with Grandma for a week or so. I arrived at her house on a cloudy Monday afternoon. The house looked the same as I'd remembered. Grandma greeted me with a warm hug and a big smile. Come in. I've just made some coffee," she said. We spent the afternoon talking and baking lots of pies and cookies and other treats. And when the sun went down, I decided to finish unpacking and then went to bed soon after around 10 p.m. Then, at around 1:30 a.m., something woke me out of my sleep, and I suddenly raised up and looked around. I waited for a few seconds, quietly listening. Then I heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from the door. The sound continued for a couple of seconds and then stopped. I called out quietly, "Grandma, is that you?" But there was no response. Then I heard something that made me shiver inside. It was someone giggling just outside the door. This time I cried out a little louder, "Grandma, is that you?" Again, it was silent. I wasn't sure what to do at that moment. I definitely did not want to go and check outside the door to see if someone was there. That much I knew. But I also thought to myself, what if Grandma is somehow in distress? Like maybe she fell down in the hallway and is trying to call out but can't speak, and all she can do is scratch at the door outside and mumble something that no one can understand. After considering this, I decided to bolster my courage and go check the door. I twisted the door handle and slowly opened the door, then stuck my head into the hallway. I looked around and I didn't see anyone. I thought to myself, maybe I'm dreaming, but that was silly. I knew I was awake. Still staring into the hallway, I suddenly heard what sounded like a door opening down the hall. I turned on my phone's flashlight and walked down the hallway to try and see which door might have opened. All the doors were closed, even my grandma's door, except for the last one I came to, which led down to the basement. The door had been slightly opened, which was weird because I knew my grandma normally locked this door. I remember asking her when I was a kid what was down there, and all she would say is just a bunch of junk that needed cleaning up, and she didn't want anyone to get hurt down there. But I couldn't help myself, and I decided to go down there and check it out after all these years. The single dim light bulb flickered on, and in the corner, I saw an old trunk. It looked a little out of place, like it was too new to be down there around everything else that was covered with dust. I decided to open the trunk, and what I found inside, I can't really explain. Inside were a bunch of photographs, mostly of people I didn't recognize. But then I found a couple of pictures of my grandmother in there. When I turned one of the pictures over, it was dated 1832, which made no sense at all because this was 2004, and my grandmother was born in 1941. Yet, in the picture from 1832, she looked exactly as she does today almost. I couldn't understand it. Suddenly, I heard the basement door creak open. I quickly threw the photos back in and closed the trunk and then hid behind a door. Suddenly, I heard Grandma's voice call down. "Is that you, dear?" she called out. I stepped out from my hiding place and replied, "Yes, Grandma, it's me. I thought I heard something down here and I came to check it out," I said. Then she replied, "I told you not to come down here. I wouldn't want you to get hurt down here in this mess." After that, we both walked back upstairs and went to bed again. The next morning, while I was eating breakfast, I felt a little weirded out by the whole thing that had happened the night before. I couldn't understand why a photo of my grandmother would be dated 1832. That plus the weird scratching and giggling outside my door made me consider not staying at my grandmother's house all week like I originally planned. But as the day kept growing later, I decided I would at least stay one more night and then tell Grandma I didn't feel good the next day and that I was going to go home early. That night, I had trouble falling asleep. But around midnight, I heard what I'm pretty sure was footsteps outside my door. Then suddenly someone twisted the door handle and slowly started to open the door. I recognized my grandma standing there. It was dark, but I could still barely make her out from the moonlight coming through the window. She slowly started to walk in and then stopped in the middle of the room. I noticed that she was holding something out in her right hand, and her left hand was behind her back, almost like it was hiding something. She calmly said to me, I thought you were having trouble sleeping, dear, so I brought you a tonic to help you fall asleep." And then she held out a glass that was filled with some dark liquid. I told her thank you, and I took it and laid it on the bedside table. Then she said, "Aren't you going to drink it?" I told her that I was starting to feel pretty tired, and I didn't think the tonic was necessary. Then, to my absolute horror, I heard Grandma say in a deep voice that didn't sound like hers at all, "Drink it now," she said. And then I noticed that her left hand that had been behind her back was now hanging at her side holding a blade. I suddenly jumped out of bed and ran downstairs as fast as I could. All I had on was my socks and a t-shirt, but I grabbed the car keys on the counter and made a run for it as fast as I could. As I was starting the car, I noticed Grandmother running out of the front door yelling something I couldn't understand. I put the car in drive, floored the gas pedal, and left a cloud of dust behind me on the way out. I never looked back, and I never saw my grandma again after that. I told my parents everything that had happened when they got back from their trip. They said she denied the whole thing, telling them she thought we were having a wonderful time at first, and then she woke up the next day to find that I was gone. Either way, I told my parents that I was never going back out there again.